Welcome, geeks, to one more episode of Next Week in History, the only program where you learn stuff with a smile on your face. First things first, thanks for all the support, guys. Every new subscriber brings a smile to my snout. As you know, we're still a tiny channel, but I know that with your help, we can make this happen because you are awesome. Monday, November 23rd. Let's start the week going back to the Wild Wild West, where in November 23rd, 1859, legendary outlaw Billy the Kid was born in New York City. Or maybe not, because no one is completely sure. Kid's real name was William Henry McCarthy Jr., and although he was a member of a violent gang and stole cows and killed a few people here and there, his story was way exaggerated by his biographer, Sheriff Garrett, who, by the way, was also his killer. What? No way! Yes, weird, right? The legend says that Kid killed 21 people, one for each year of his life, but that is just one of many false myths about him. Sure, he killed a few people, but have you ever watched a Wild West movie? That was daily routine back then. Also, he's often pictured as very aggressive and with a bad temper, but in fact, everyone who came in contact with the kid agrees that he had a very easygoing personality, a great sense of humor, and was always in good spirits. Okay, maybe the guys he killed did nothing like that, but we cannot ask them, can we? No, this final fact about Billy the Kid will blow your mind. Did you know that he was never, ever on a wanted poster? No, I feel cheated now. People also felt cheated back in November 23, 1924, when Edwin Hubble published in the New York Times his discovery that Andromeda was a completely different galaxy from the Milky Way. Why is that so important? Because back then, people thought that the Milky Way was the entire universe, and all of a sudden, Hubble announced that actually, the universe contained many galaxies, making us, poor Earthlings, even smaller and more insignificant than we thought. Hubble's discovery changed the scientific view of the universe, well, for almost everybody, and he's considered today one of the greatest astronomers of the 20th century. So great, in fact, that NASA named an orbiting telescope after him, and since 1990, the Hubble telescope has provided us with some of the coolest, most awesome images of this big universe of ours. Wait, what if there is more than one universe? Share. November 23rd brings us another world-changing event, the birth in 1992 of Destiny Hope Cyrus, aka Miley Cyrus. And now half of you will be like, what? Why is this a historical event worth mentioning? But come on, don't be like that. Sure, she's still young and sometimes she might come up as a bit weird, but I know she's so lovely inside. Don't you believe me? Look at this picture we took together a while back. Isn't she nice? Love you too, Miley. Happy birthday! Tuesday, November 24th. November 24th is another world-changing day because in 1859, Charles Darwin published On the Origin of Species, which became an instant bestseller, selling out the 1,250 copies he made in just one day. That might not seem a lot, but for a book with a wizards or vampires, that is a home run. In that book, Darwin explained his theory of evolution, where he established that all species of life have descended over time from common ancestors, and gave strong evidence that there is a natural, even observable way for life to change, a process he called natural selection. To be fair, there was this other guy, Alfred Russel Wallace, that reached the same conclusions and published them at the same time, but history is cruel. And while Darwin is now a god of science, Wallace's contribution is kind of, who cares? Actually, Darwin had initially developed his theory while on a 5-year research trip aboard the HMS Beagle that took him around the world. But once back, he was afraid of publishing it because of its radical implications. He did not want to end up burned crisp by the church, so he stalled for years and years until he saw the work of Wallace, who had reached basically the same conclusions. Now it was published or be forgotten, so he published. Luckily, nobody ended up on the spike for this, although evolution was very unpopular among religious people. Actually, even now, when evolution has become a basic pillar of scientific development and there's mountains of proof of its validity, some still deny it. And let's face it, they offer very attractive arguments. Jesus riding a dinosaur. Cool. November 24th also marks the sad day in 1991 when Freddie Mercury passed away. Who was he? He was a rock singer legend and lead vocalist, songwriter, and soul of rock band Queen. Freddie Mercury had a short but intense life and left a legacy of amazing songs such as Bohemian Rhapsody, We Are the Champions, and We Will Rock You. Mercury was a force of nature on stage and has been defined as one of rock's greatest all-time entertainments with a legendary performance at Live Aid in 1985 that's been described as the greatest live performance in the history of rock music. His talent went beyond music, because did you know that he studied art and graphic design and he actually designed himself the Queen crest? What an amazing person. Unfortunately, his life was cut short because of AIDS just one day after he announced that he was HIV positive. Wednesday, November 25th. Those of you lovers of
medieval conspiracies
are in for a treat, because November 25th marks the anniversary of the sinking of the White Ship in 1120, and believe it or not, the sinking of just one ship changed English history and started a civil war and a long period of crisis called the Anarchy. So, what happened? Turns out King Henry I of England was in Normandy for the usual war business and got tired and decided to return home. But as he was about to take his boat, a new fancy and shiny one appeared out of the blue, and the captain asked for the honor to take the king back home. The king refused but said, "Why don't you take my only surviving son and heir, William, and a bunch of his friends instead?" To which the prince said, "Cool." So there they go. The king left first, and as soon as he disappeared, the White Ship party started, with all you can drink booze for both the guests and the crew. And then Prince William was like, "Hey, let's speed up this boat and arrive to England before daddy." And the drunk sailors were like, "Yeah, of course! Never mind, it's dark already and we can't see shit." So of course, they struck a submerged rock and everyone ended up with a boat under the sea. The prince actually managed to get safely on a small rescue boat, but then he heard his half-sister asking for help, so he asked to go back to save her. But then everybody on the sea tried to get on the small boat, and of course, the small boat also ended under the sea. So the king suddenly lost his hair and tried to establish his daughter Matilda as queen, but as soon as he died, his nephew Stephen took the opportunity and seized power. In response, Matilda and her husband started a war, and the rest, my dear, is history. Back to the incident. Some suggest that maybe the sinking was not an accident. Actually, Stephen was also supposed to be on board of the White Ship, but before the ship left, decided to disembark at the last minute. Supposedly because he was feeling sick, right? Sick. Back to modern times, November 25th marks the debut of Woody Woodpecker in 1940. And for those of you who don't know him, Woody Woodpecker is a crazy cartoon character created by Walter Lantz that became one of the cartoon stars at Universal. In 1957, Woody starred on his own cartoon show, and he even had a cameo in the 1988 film Who Framed Roger Rabbit. What was his most famous trait? He was insane, and me like it. Anyway, did you know that Woody Woodpecker even has a motion picture star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame? So, happy birthday, happy birthday! Thursday, November 26th. November 26th is a day of celebration in the US. That is, unless you're a turkey, in which case, run, it's Thanksgiving! That same day in 1789, President George Washington proclaimed a National Thanksgiving Day in honor of the Constitution that had just been signed. And that celebration was formally established also on November 26, 1863 by President Abraham Lincoln, in stating that it should be celebrated annually on the final Thursday of November. But that was changed later to the fourth Thursday of November, because sometimes November has 5 weeks and that was kind of messing things up. Anyway, initially the idea was to make Thanksgiving a day of prayer and giving thanks to God, but it eventually evolved into a day of meeting with the family, eating until you explode, and watching some football. Actually, did you know that Americans eat more food on Thanksgiving than on any other day of the year? But give me that turkey. Thanksgiving also marks the beginning of the holiday season and its crazy shopping spree, with the following day being the famous Black Friday. And then now you have Cyber Monday, and then Giving Tuesday, and from this year on we will push for Subscribe My Channel Wednesday, cause why not? Anyway, all this looks more romantic on the story of the first Thanksgiving, you know, with the Pilgrims, the Native Americans, the harvest, and all that kumbaya. But as we all know, all that didn't last long, especially for the Native Americans. Anyway, last fun fact. Did you know that Jingle Bells was actually originally written for Thanksgiving? But who can sing after eating so much? No one! I guess that's why they decided to move it to Christmas. Also, on November 26, 1922, Howard Carter and Lord Carnarvon were in a celebration mood because they had just opened the tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamun, becoming the first people to step foot there in over 3,000 years. That discovery was a huge one because it was the best preserved and most intact pharaonic tomb ever found in the Valley of the Kings, and it had many, many treasures. My precious! So King Tut went from being an unknown pharaoh that died young and whose tomb has been lost to time to being a pharaoh rock star. And you would think that would have made him happy, but the legend says that King Tut was not too happy about this disturbance of his eternal sleep, because not long after this discovery started a number of mysterious incidents and sudden deaths of those who excavated this tomb. And it was not long before people started talking about the curse of the pharaoh. Friday, November 27th. November 27, 1895 can be considered the day that defined the creation of the Nobel Prize. On that day, Alfred Nobel, who was a rich Swedish chemist inventor, changed his will for the third time because he did not like the way history would remember him. Cause he kind of invented dynamite amongst a few other explosives, and he kind of got rich making weapons, which of course were used to kill people, so how do you think people are gonna remember you? Anyway, that had never bothered him much, but one day his brother died, and one French newspaper mistook his brother for him and published that the Merchant of Death was dead. Reading that article sparked an existential crisis on Nobel and made him very worried about his legacy. As a result, he changed his will for a third and last time, and when it was opened and read after his death, BAM! He had left his wealth for the establishment of a yearly prize to be given to those who during the preceding year had created the greatest benefit to mankind. Way to clean your name, Alfred! Naturally, his family was not very happy. My money! So they tried to oppose to the establishment of the Nobel Prize, but they did not succeed, and 5 years later, in 1901, the first Nobel Prize was awarded. Our following star did not need dynamite to bust through a wall. On November 27, 1940, somewhere in Chinatown in San Francisco, Bruce Lee was born. Who was Bruce Lee? Are you kidding me? He was the only man in the world that could make Chuck Norris cry. He was a movie star and the most influential and kick-ass martial artist of all time. Bruce Lee came from a wealthy Hong Kong family and started acting when he was a baby. However, that did not keep him from being involved in street fights and having troubles with gangs. So his parents decided it would be best for him to learn martial arts, which led him to him training under Ip Man, the father of Wing Chun. However, after a big street fight, his parents shipped him back to the US to protect his life from the triads. Once in the US, Bruce started teaching martial arts, but after an exhibition on Long Beach, he landed a part in the TV show The Green Hornet, and a few years later moved back to Hong Kong to become a huge star with films such as Fist of Fury or Way of the Dragon that created a new world craze about martial arts. I mean, he was crazy good. He could snatch a dime off a person's open palm before they could close it and leave a penny behind. During a fight, he once landed 15 punches, a kick, and knocked out his opponent in just 11 seconds. Crazy. His kicks were so fast that they had to be filmed in slow motion so they would not appear fake. Wow. And on top of that, he was a great cha-cha dancer. Okay, nothing can top that. But as most great legends, sadly he died very young at the age of 32. His legacy, though, is huge. He was such an icon that he's the inspiration behind video game characters such as Liu Kang from Mortal Kombat, Law from Tekken, and Fei Long from Street Fighter 2. Saturday, November 28th. November 28th is a big day in the women's equality movement because on that day in 1893, New Zealand became the first country in the world in which women could vote in a national election. Yes, before that day, some countries claimed to be a democracy, but somehow they did not think that would also apply to women. Crazy. Even after that day, women in New Zealand were not allowed to run as candidates until 26 years later. That comes to show that these achievements were not easy. They were the result of the hard work and perseverance of great women such as Kate Shepherd, who was the leader in the New Zealand's women's suffrage movement and now has her image displayed on New Zealand's $10 bill. So we want to honor her and all the other amazing women that are often lost from history just because they were born women in a time where just men held all the power. November 28 marks also a sad moment in the world of comedy because on that day in 2010, Leslie Nielsen passed away. Leslie Nielsen was a Canadian-American actor and comedian who appeared in more than 100 films and 1,500 television programs, portraying more than 200 characters. He started playing dramatic roles, western and romance, but in the 80s moved to comedy, and that is where he made his biggest mark with crazy films such as Airplane, the Naked Gun trilogy, and the TV series The Police Squad. Nielsen was a practical joker and known for pranking people with a portable hand-controlled fart machine, which he always carried with him. Leslie's love for fart jokes went beyond the grave because he asked for his gravestone to be marked with a chic inscription, "Let her rip," showing the world that laughter never dies. Sunday, November 29th. November 29 starts with a very complicated matter: Palestine. In 1947, Britain decided to get out of Palestine because it was getting very messy and asked the United Nations to figure out what to do. On November 29, 1947, the General Assembly of the United Nations adopted a resolution that recommended the establishment in Palestine of a Jewish state and an Arab state, setting the capital, Jerusalem, as a neutral ground shared by both sides. And of course, that solved nothing. Arabs complained that they had been taken out of their lands and that the plan was unfair. Jewish complained that Arabs were killing them. Then Arabs complained that Jews were killing them even more. And all that ended up with a war where the Jews proclaimed the creation of Israel, crushed the Arabs, and ended up in control of most of the territory. But of course, that solved nothing. And today, after many attempts to bring peace to the region, Palestine is still a mess with more than 6.5 million Palestinian refugees, proving once more that the United Nations is not very good at solving problems. That conflict is so depressing, but if you need something to take your mind off those worries, you're in luck, cause November 29th also celebrates the release in 1972 of the world's first best-selling video game, Pong! Pong was the first sport arcade video game and it was very simple, 2 players and a game of tennis. It was the first game developed by Atari and in fact was initially created as a training exercise assigned to Atari's first employee Alan Alcorn by co-founder Nolan Bushnell. Bushnell based the idea on an electronic ping-pong game included in the world's first home game console, the Magnavox Odyssey. But the quality of Alcorn's work was so good that Atari decided to manufacture the game, which of course later on ended up with a lawsuit against Atari. Anyway, Pong's success inspired many companies to get into the video game business, for example, Konami and Nintendo. In fact, Nintendo entered the video game market with clones of Pong, and it was thanks to that revenue that the company survived to create more games. So we could say that there would be no Super Mario, no Pokemon without Pong. Pika Pikachu! That brings us to the end of this episode of Next Week's in History. Hope you enjoy it. Please like, share and subscribe, and remember, with coconuts, be happy, have fun, and let's go nuts. See you next week, geeks!